running a little bit over time, but a big thank you to our sustainability panel for inspiring us to go beyond the greenwash. Now let's dive into the world of payments. So the payments landscape is ever evolving, and PayTo is at the forefront of this transformation. In this session, we'll explore how PayTo is delivering on its promise to revolutionise transactions. So a huge thank you to our panellists for joining us today. I will hand over to Daniel Knight, partner at K&L Gates, to introduce everyone, but a big round of applause for our panellists here today.
Thanks everyone, and thanks for being here. PayTo was initially conceived as a replacement for direct debit, the way that merchants pull money for recurring payments, and it's really evolved to do much more than that. So we want to unpack where it is at the moment, some challenges, some opportunities for the future. That's the plan for the half an hour we have. And we've got a great panel today of people across the spectrum in terms of their involvement with PayTo. So I'll hand to each of them now to give it a quick introduction of who they are and their PayTo connection. So Justin, first with you.
Thank you. So I'm Justin, Head of Solutions at Zepto. So at Zepto, we exclusively provide infrastructure-style account-to-account payment services. A couple of years ago, we made the decision to connect directly to the NPP and become a connected institution for the purposes of providing those PayTo services. So as a result, laser focused on all things PayTo and really excited to bring it to market and chat through challenges, successes and everything else.
Great, thanks Helen.
Hi, Helen Flaherty. I'm Head of Product at Global Payments, and we own eWay and EasyDebit domestic payment brands. I've been on the PayTo journey and more broadly NPP for a long time, so I was part of the original team for industry to build the platform, and EasyDebit was one of the first providers to be a payment initiator for PayTo. So we're very focused on delivering an integrated payments proposition to our software partners. We like to be the payments engine in someone's platform, and we see PayTo being a very key enabler for merchants of all sizes and shapes to kind of really drive real-time payments in their business.
Great, thanks Helen. Tim?
Tim Fagan, General Manager for Business Payments at Australian Payments Plus. So I lead the product teams for the new payments platform and BPay, under which kind of new payments platform is PayTo as one of kind of our key leading products. At AP Plus, we really try to drive at the centre kind of the operation of the scheme, but also work with industry to really drive the product forward, particularly for adoption.
Hi everyone, Deanna Nixajira. I work at National Australia Bank, Associate Director, Go-to-Market. So one of my key roles is to bring to our clients new propositions, including PayTo. Prior to that, I was the product owner, product manager for MPP at NAB, so I've been heavily involved with PayTo since its inception. Thank you.
Fantastic, thanks guys. And so Tim, we might go to you first. Just interested with PayTo live now, just interested in where you see sort of current functionality and access.
So I think firstly from a consumer access perspective, we're now at the point where we have pretty much ubiquity on the consumer side for PayTo. Almost every Australian consumer, regardless of where they bank, can make PayTo payments. They can authorise, they can manage PayTo agreements within the banking app or through online banking. So the previous issues we had where not all consumers were able to use PayTo really been kind of closed out as an issue. Secondly, I would say on the initiator side of the ecosystem, so payment service providers, fintechs, like we have on this panel today, as well as banks, are now initiating, providing these PayTo services to kind of the Australian economy, including to merchants and businesses. And we've seen major banks come and join that ecosystem to provide those services too. So I think from a consumer side and from the initiator side of the market and the ecosystem, we're in a pretty healthy place. I would say, where are we going next? What's kind of the next phase for PayTo? I think we're really looking to see more adoption and more coverage for merchants, billers, providing PayTo to their consumer base. And that's kind of what we're aiming to achieve, and I think the premise of this panel today.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Tim. And so, Justin, from your side, what are you seeing in terms of consumer and business sort of interest in PayTo and launching use cases?
Yeah, look, I think it's been a slow journey and a bit of a mixed bag overall, really. It's a lot of what we hear is kind of that chicken and egg situation where, in order for consumers to really recognise the PayTo brand, understand how it works, it's going to require one of those big names, the Woolworths of the world, the JB Hi-Fis, etc., someone to bring that on so that their customers can understand what it is, how it works, and the benefits of using it. And then on the flip side, those brand names want to make sure that when they do bring a new payment method to market, that it is understood by customers, and so it's kind of who's going to go first and how we're going to get there. I think, from a consumer side, I can guarantee sitting in a room full of payments people talking about PayTo specifically, less than 50%, probably 25% of people have ever made a PayTo payment. So that tells you a little bit of sort of where we are. I think once you dig into it a little bit, though, some of the actual consumer experiences have been good. Again, kind of depends on the institution of which they're banking with. I might get a push notification, which sends me straight to my agreement, and I can authorise it really quickly and easily. On the flip side, I might not get any notification at all, and I've got to dig through 10 different menus to find out how PayTo works and to actually authorise it. So in a bit of a challenging spot, it's early stages, but we're certainly on the right track. I think on the business side, there has been a lot of interest in particular use cases, and you mentioned direct debit replacement initially. It's going to take us some time to get there, but being able to solve specific problems that other payment methods don't necessarily have the capacity to handle at the moment is certainly piqued some interest. Again, on the actual experience side, a lot of those businesses and organisations have had great success, but some of them have had challenges in terms of getting up and going and working through some of the challenges that have come about as a result of PayTo being launched.
Okay, great. And Deanna, from your side, what sort of use cases are you seeing getting good traction at the moment?
Yeah, sure, thanks. So look, I think PayTo lends itself for such a broad range of use cases, but given some of the context and the position we're at the moment with PayTo being still new and emerging, two use case probably comes to mind. And if we think about adoption from a business or a merchant perspective, it's all around, well, what value do I get from it? What do I need to do differently? And sort of weighing off the investment versus the value. And I think what we're seeing today in terms of two key use cases, one, which NAB actually just went live with a few months ago, is around repayments for loans or for lending. So we recently went live with one of our non-bank financial institution FinTechs in terms of offering PayTo as a way to make an additional or top-up repayment. And if you think about the value that PayTo offers versus some of the other existing payment method for that particular use case, it is all around faster or quicker cash flow, easier reconciliation, as well as helping their borrowers benefit from being able to pay down their debt or their lending much faster. So I think, again, in terms of seeing what the benefits are in the short, medium and long term, that was one of the first use cases that will be expanded to look at ongoing recurring loan repayments, which is super exciting. I think that will really bring to life some of the additional the value and the benefits of PayTo capability. The other use case is around e-commerce. And again, back to the point around, well, what's a value proposition for the merchant and the consumer? If you think about sort of the traditional checkout payment options, PayTo is an alternative and not a replacement per se, but an additional payment option at checkout. And because it is digitally enabled, it really lends itself to that particular use case. Obviously, the benefits of sort of direct cost savings or cost efficiency, given account to account, may be able to be provided at a low cost. I think that direct benefit and value is really really of interest in the e-commerce use case. But I think for both those use cases, the other sort of key consideration is around end payer or customer experience. And whilst, PayTo offers, massive benefits in terms of greater visibility control through banking apps, so more security or, safer, if we want to use that term, I think just ensuring that the experience is just as easy or, if not easier, for the consumer is an important one. And part of that, and I think we'll touch on it a little bit later, is around, how do we actually increase awareness to help with adoption and help with incentivisation from a payer perspective. So I won't go into any further detail because I know we'll touch on that a little bit later.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Deanna. Interested in views from the other panellists as well about sort of innovative use cases, things that in the medium to longer term that PayTo might unlock, perhaps that hadn't been thought of when it was designed, but ways that you think merchants and customers might be able to use it to solve and to create new experiences. So I don't know, Helen, if you've got some thoughts on that.
Sure. Diane stole some of my thunder there. So e-com is probably a classic use case, I think, for PayTo. While we currently think about it much more in the recurring scenario, given it's, it's going to be the one that replaces direct debit and BECS in the long run, because of that authorisation step as part of the payment agreement, it clearly can look and feel like a card payment and give some satisfaction around the certainty of that payment to the merchant and obviously cash flow incentives around managing that money for their business. So I think there's many use cases that we need to explore. We probably need to get greater adoption and awareness around it before you start to see what some of the fintechs can do around the fringe. Really, most of the things that I'm seeing in my business is anything around time-sensitive use cases. So lending's a perfectly good example. But, we have a lot of choice. Businesses have a lot of choice, consumers have a lot of choice. The reality of a consumer walking into and signing up, for example, their gym membership and saying, I genuinely want to use PayTo, is definitely not something happening in the real world at this point. So we've got a long way to go to kind of really drive that level and say, yep, it's an option. We're certainly building it into our checkout flows. We're having conversations with merchants and partners around it, but people genuinely using it in anger, I think we've got a long way to go to kind of really then start to unlock and explore future innovation.
Okay. And just for the merchants where you do have that conversation, are they seeing the value and the upside for them at this stage, or is that still
Not really. So probably two scenarios. So if they just want to be an early adopter, so innovation, want the innovation halo, then hey, give it to me. I want to be ahead of the curve for my peer set in my industry. Or it's much more about just kind of future-proofing your business and saying, when this is available and when you want it, we've kind of got it for you. But really, we provide kind of a range of payment channels for our customers, so it's kind of part of the mix. At the moment, it's not a dominant part of the mix.
Got it. And what about you, Justin? What are you seeing among your user base?
I could probably harp on about use cases all day, but I think a lot of the big ones have been covered. There's probably just two more which I'd like to touch on. So, like some of the, use cases we've seen have been not necessarily brand new from a payment method perspective, but just in terms of how PayTo can actually optimise specific flows. So one good example of that is on a sort of a phone-based or call centre-based approach where, for anyone who's implemented an IBR card-based solution, it's quite a painful, expensive process and not always a great customer experience as well. So that's one of the use cases we've seen which has really gained some traction and provided benefit to both merchant and payer customer. And I think secondly, as a more general comment, it's really just the utilisation of the ISO 20022 data standard in terms of including more data-rich payments transactions, extending all the way to the PayTo agreements as well. So that certainly opens up a number of use cases. We've seen things like multiple different legal entities being able to string separate payments, what would have been previously a separate payment, into a single payment flow, using that additional data to reconcile more effectively, more efficiently, and actually creating a better customer experience as well, where they're not seeing multiple transactions on their bank statement, things like that. So.
Yeah, great. And Tim, anything different that you're seeing from a network perspective in terms of use cases?
I think that's right. I think we're seeing a lot of early use cases where there's a lot of value in the speed of the payment compared to kind of alternative substitutes. I think at the network level, we're really focused on expanding the use cases, unblocking use cases such as paying on behalf of a business, as well as what was referenced before, which was the original intention of the PayTo design, which was direct debit, the modern alternative to direct debit. I think we're very keen to see kind of progress, adoption in some of those key verticals, particularly where direct debit is a key substitute.
Great. Okay. Thank you. And we've talked a little bit about the challenges so far of greater adoption. And Tim, you mentioned sort of ubiquity of access for consumer accounts being with us as of now, which is great. Just interested in the panel's thoughts about other challenges that there are, sort of things that are in the blocking greater adoption of PayTo. So perhaps Deanna, first to you, what are you saying?
Yeah, sure. And look, I think you touched on a few key ones around adoption and ubiquity, and it is a bit of chicken and egg. I think from a NAB perspective, whilst we've enabled over 7.5 million consumer accounts, there is still a long way to go, and not only in terms of the functionality, but also ensuring that there is not only reach but resilience and reliability of the system, so that service variability is minimalised and there is confidence in terms of the service itself. I think the other key challenge around adoption from a business perspective is, again, making sure that there is a compelling value proposition. Obviously, to get people to change what they do today can be quite difficult, so ensuring that there are enough benefits and enough value to actually do something differently, and also supporting businesses and merchants in terms of the end-to-end. So, what does that actual change look like? What does the migration, or rather the transition away from BECS look like in the next few years? So I think that's, a real challenge, but also an opportunity in terms of really supporting businesses to see PayTo as an opportunity to move forward and to help them with the impending BECS migration happening in what seems like a long time away, but really isn't in the world of payments. So.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, I think the BECS migration, is covered in a lot of payments panels throughout the conference, and obviously for PayTo to step up in preparation for that. There's a need to cope with volume at a cost that's acceptable to consumers with that level of resilience that people are used to. Tim, what are you seeing in terms of what's needed to get PayTo to that point?
I mean, I still think there are areas that we're focused on to improve the consumer experience. Quicker responses, right, when a customer is at checkout. Less likelihood of a payment being held or blocked because of concerns around the risk profile of the payment. So those are kind of items that we're looking to address. We've got an action plan of items that at the industry level we're working on, such as increasing, enabling business accounts for PayTo, giving banks greater confidence around what's in the payment message to help manage their own risk profiles. And we think those uplifts that will be seen by consumers at the experience level will also help kind of drive the adoption further. I think to the point made by other panelists as well, I think adoption will spur further adoption, right? Once consumers see it live in market, once direct debit billers see a different insurance company or a different utilities company making it available for the consumer base, the benefits and the value of PayTo will become a lot more real, a lot more visible for everyone, and I think we really need that to further spur the adoption.
Yeah, sure. You get that sort of critical mass effect, don't you, where consumers are used to using it for one of their providers, and so they just start to look for it for others, and then perhaps you do start to have those conversations, Helen, where merchants are asking for it. I'm interested in your perspective too on what you think is needed to drive greater uptake.
So similar things from a merchant perspective, or on the acquiring side of the transaction, we definitely need at a system level more consistency across how that experience is delivered out to the payer or to the customer. There isn't that level, which obviously we've just spoken around making sure there's consistency. What I experience at one institution will be the same as the next institution, to give that confidence, that trust, that transparency back to the payer to say, yep, that thing worked for me, I'm going to do that again and again and again, particularly when they understand the level of control that they'll have over those transactions through their banking app. So I think part of driving that adoption will come from signing up some key merchants. It'd be great to have a big utility there or a big telco. And then I think then it will be kind of quite a rapid acceleration. We're kind of just sort of still sitting at that tipping point. and then cost or the commercials around the transactions. So at the moment, for most of my merchants, it's just, 4x plus more expensive than over what I do today on DD. So too expensive for most use cases in reality. So we kind of, need to get the volume up to then drive the cost down to then drive the acceleration on the adoption. And hopefully all before 2030 when BEX disappears.
Yeah, great. Other perspectives on that, either from you, Justin, or Deanna?
Yeah, look, I think it's really about finding those use cases where, in the context of where we are today, where do we drive that benefit, and how can we actually iterate on that and think about the opportunity in the medium and long term as well. So really helping support and educate businesses and merchants around what that looks like.
Great. Okay, so lots of sessions through the conference as well about CDR and open banking. Obviously, there's been a push to have payment initiation form part of open banking at some point. I'm interested in the thoughts of the panel about the role that payment initiation has in a world where we already have PayTo. And perhaps start with you, Tim. How do you see the two sitting together if they do?
It's an interesting question. I think PayTo was designed with some of the lessons of kind of open banking initiation in other markets, is the first thing I would say. I think from an AP Plus perspective, we're certainly open to the prospect of payment initiation coming into the market. But I would say that, we haven't yet seen a use case that, there's a suggestion that open banking payment initiation can meet that PayTo can't. And there's a lot of work that the industry, is focused on to try and get PayTo right and adopted and successful, which is kind of the focus for us as a business.
Great. And any use cases in that category for you guys that sort of calling out for a payment initiation that PayTo can't solve?
Nothing from my perspective.
I think action initiation is one thing, but when you look more broadly at CDR, there's probably a larger application for using CDR data within the payment flow, not necessarily acting on it for any particular reason, but potentially using it for a fraud check prior to initiating a PayTo payment or establishing a PayTo agreement. So I think there is a middle ground somewhere between pure action initiation versus PayTo or NPP payments, but certainly a long path to get there and working out exactly what's going to work best for the market. I think there probably is a number of use cases which would fit into that category, but yeah, we're still, I think, a fair way off.
Great, okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks to the panellists. That does bring us to time. So thanks, everyone, for your time. We could talk about PayTo for a lot longer, but that is all we have time for. So thanks, everyone, for your attention. Thanks to the panel.